The clock ticked louder than usual, its rhythm filling the silent room. A faint glow from the streetlights outside filtered through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the desk. The journal lay open before him, its pristine pages glowing. Faintly under the table lamp, he twirled the pen between his fingers, staring at the empty space where his words should be. Why is this so hard? He thought, frustration bubbling under his skin. New Year's Eve always carried a sense of pressure, a heavy expectation to declare some grand transformation. Friends and coworkers had shared their resolutions with practice confidence: lose 20 pounds, land a promotion, quit smoking. Simple, tangible, achievable. But as he sat there, searching for the perfect goal, his mind swirled with indecision. What did he really want? To be rich? Sure. But wasn't that a bit kitsch? To travel the world? Romantic, maybe, but expensive. To find love? That felt like cheating, as if happiness could be outsourced to someone else. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, as if answers might descend from the cracks in the plaster. Deep down, he wasn't just searching for a goal, he was searching for meaning. A reason to believe this year would be different, better. The pen hovered over the page, his hand trembling slightly. Then, with a deep breath, he scrawled the words, become wealthy and financially free. The ink bled into the paper, solid and final. He closed the journal and set it on the nightstand. As he crawled into bed, his chest felt lighter, but a shadow of doubt lingered in his mind. The resolution seemed hollow. He brushed the thought aside, closed his eyes, and waited for sleep to take him. It didn't take long. The first thing he noticed was the light, a golden, almost otherworldly glow streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood in the middle of an opulent penthouse, its walls lined with sleek art and books he'd never read. The air smelled faintly of polished leather and something citrusy, like wealth itself had a scent. He turned slowly, taking it all in. The city stretched out beneath him, glittering in the night like a treasure chest spilled open. On a marble table, a bottle of champagne waited in a bucket of ice, condensation tracing lazy trails down the glass. This is it, he thought. I made it. He glanced down and found himself dressed sharply, a tailored suit that fit like it had been sculpted for his body. His reflection in the glass wall showed someone confident, poised, untouchable. The doorbell chimed and a procession of people entered, smiling faces, sharp laughter, voices praising him for his success. A man slapped him on the back, congratulating him on his latest business deal. A woman leaned in close, her perfume intoxicating, as she whispered something about him being the most influential man in the city. It was intoxicating, all of it. For a moment, he basked in their attention, their admiration. But as the night wore on, small cracks began to appear. The first was when a man, drink in hand, asked how he managed to balance everything: his career, his relationships, his happiness. The question hung in the air like a taunt, and he found himself stammering something vague about hard work and focus. Later, as he mingled, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his chest tighten. A woman in a sequin dress whispered to her companion, "He's brilliant, sure, but have you heard how ruthless he is? I'd never trust him." Another guest added, "I heard he barely sees his family anymore. Too busy being a big shot." The words stung, though he laughed it off. Was that who he had become? Or worse, was that who he'd always been, beneath the surface? The evening spiraled further when his assistant approached with a phone call. "It's urgent," they said, apologetic but firm. He excused himself and retreated to his private study. The voice on the other end was cold and clinical. "The investors are unhappy. They want answers by morning. If you can't deliver, we could be looking at serious losses." His stomach churned. He had everything he thought he wanted, yet the pressure was relentless. The wealth, the status, it didn't come with freedom. It came with shackles. By the time he returned to the party, the guests were leaving. Their smiles were brittle, their compliments perfunctory. He watched them go, a strange hollowness creeping into his chest. No one stayed. No one truly cared. He stood alone by the window, staring at the city lights. They flickered like distant stars, beautiful but unreachable. The hum of voices turned to static, the gold around him dulled. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the dream unraveled. The penthouse dissolved into darkness, and he woke with a jolt. The room was silent. His chest was tight. He turned to the journal on his nightstand, its cover gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The words inside, "become wealthy and financially free," felt like a cruel joke. For the first time, he wondered if wealth. The journal lay open on his desk, the words from the previous night staring back at him in stark, unforgiving ink. "Become wealthy and financially free." He frowned, tapping the pen against the page. The dream of wealth had left a bitter taste, the echoes of hollow laughter and flickering city lights still lingering in his mind. With a sharp stroke, he drew a line through the resolution. It felt oddly liberating, like shedding a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. He paused, letting the blank space beneath the crossed-out words taunt him for a moment, then began to write. Achieve peak physical health and fitness. This felt different, pure, even noble. A goal for himself, his body, his longevity. Not a hollow pursuit like riches. He smiled faintly as he closed the journal, placing it carefully back on the nightstand. Maybe this resolution would be the one. As he crawled under the covers, sleep came easily. His muscles relaxed, his breath slowed, and the remnants of the waking world dissolved into the promise of a better, healthier self. He found himself in a gym. It was bright and pristine, its walls gleaming with motivational quotes in bold lettering. No pain, no gain. Push yourself beyond limits. He was at the center of it all, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment and rows of people clapping and cheering for him. In his dream, his body was unrecognizable, lean, muscular, and impossibly perfect. He felt light, strong, invincible. Running on a treadmill, his pace didn't falter, his breath never labored. When he shifted to lifting weights, the barbell bent under the strain of impossible loads, yet he hoisted it effortlessly. The dream gave him an intoxicating high. Gone were the aches and sluggishness of reality. His reflection in the mirror was that of an idealized version of himself, sharp jawline, chiseled abs, glowing skin. People crowded around him, showering him with admiration and asking for advice. "You're an inspiration," one woman said, her voice filled with awe. "How do you stay so disciplined?" a young man asked, notebook in hand, ready to jot down wisdom. He smiled, basking in their admiration. "Hard work and focus," he replied smoothly. "Anyone can do it if they're willing to sacrifice." At first, the words felt powerful, but as the dream shifted, the sacrifices began to show. He sat in his spotless kitchen, eating the same bland, meticulously portioned meal. A friend called to invite him to a dinner party, but he declined. Too many calories, too little sleep. Another text came in from a family member, asking to meet up. He stared at the screen, hesitating. His schedule was packed with workouts and recovery sessions. He found himself at home alone, scrolling through pictures of his abs on social media, counting likes and comments. The praise was plentiful but fleeting. In another flash, he was at the gym again, pushing his body beyond its limits. His knees ached, his back screamed, but he refused to stop. The crowd around him began to blur, their cheers distant and hollow. Suddenly, his reflection in the mirror changed. The strong, radiant figure was gone, replaced by someone gaunt, exhausted, and hollow-eyed. He stared, panic rising in his chest. Was this what he had worked so hard to become? The dream ended abruptly. He woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. His body felt heavier than it had in years, as if the perfection of the dream had taken a toll on his waking self. The journal was still there on his nightstand, the words mocking him once again. He closed his eyes and sighed, the lingering image of his skeletal reflection refusing to fade. The journal was back in his hands, the words "achieve peak physical health and fitness" staring up at him. His pen hovered over the page as memories of the last dream flooded his mind, the endless routines, the isolation, the pain behind the perfect exterior. He let out a long sigh and drew a firm line through the resolution. Why was this so hard? Why did every goal he chose feel right at first, but leave him hollow in the end? He tapped the pen against his chin, his thoughts drifting. What if it's not about wealth or fitness? What if it's about being seen, being valued? A new idea began to take shape, one that seemed to strike at something deeper. Slowly he wrote, "Achieve fame and recognition." The words gleamed on the page, full of promise. Fame. It wasn't about money or strength, it was about leaving a mark, about mattering in a way no one could deny. A spark of excitement flared in his chest as he set the journal back on the nightstand and slipped under the covers. This time, sleep came quickly, pulling him into a world where his name was on everyone's lips. The dream opened with a spotlight, bright and warm, bathing him in its glow. The crowd roared as he stepped onto a grand stage, their cheers deafening. Cameras flashed, capturing his every move. His face was everywhere on billboards, magazine covers, and the massive screens behind him. He waved to the crowd, a dazzling smile on his face. They chanted his name like a mantra, their adoration palpable. He was somebody. People lined up for autographs, their eyes wide with awe. Journalists clamored for interviews, shoving microphones toward him, desperate for a moment of his attention. At first, it was intoxicating. The validation, the applause, the sheer energy of being adored, it was everything he had imagined and more. He answered questions with wit and charm, basking in the laughter and applause that followed every word. But as the dream unfolded, cracks began to form. A reporter asked a question about a scandal he didn't recognize. The crowd leaned in, waiting for his answer, their expressions teetering between admiration and judgment. He stammered, unsure how to respond, and the atmosphere shifted. Whispers rippled through the audience, their applause turning into murmurs of doubt. Later, he found himself backstage, scrolling through his phone. The notifications were endless, thousands of comments, posts, and opinions about him. Many were glowing, but some were scathing, dissecting his every move, his every word. Fame comes at a price, a voice behind him said. He turned to see an older celebrity, their face lined with the weight of years in the spotlight. And the price is yourself. The words lingered as the dream morphed again. He was alone in a cavernous dressing room, staring at his reflection. The face in the mirror looked tired, worn. His smile was forced, his eyes empty. He turned away, only to hear the muffled roar of the crowd outside. They were waiting for him, demanding more of him, always more. The applause now felt like a trap, a golden cage from which there was no escape. He woke with a gasp, the echoes of the crowd still ringing in his ears. The room was dark and quiet, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the dream. The journal sat on the nightstand, its cover glinting faintly in the moonlight. He reached for it, flipping to the page with his latest resolution. Achieve fame and recognition. With trembling hands, he drew a line through it. Another resolution, another hollow dream. He closed the journal and slumped back against the pillow, his chest tight with disappointment. The journal sat on his lap, its pages riddled with crossed-out resolutions. He stared at the blank space beneath the most recent line, achieve fame and recognition, and tapped his pen against the edge of the notebook. This time, he hesitated. Longer. The previous dreams had each promised happiness, but delivered something else entirely. Was there a resolution that wouldn't unravel under the weight of reality? He let his mind wander to the one thing he hadn't tried yet. The thing so many seemed to chase as the ultimate source of fulfillment. Love. The word carried a comforting warmth. With cautious strokes, he wrote, find true love and build a perfect relationship. The words shimmered with promise. Love wasn't about wealth or status. It was about connection, about being truly seen and accepted. This had to be the answer. Satisfied, he closed the journal, placed it on the nightstand, and slipped under the covers. Sleep wrapped around him like a soft blanket, and he drifted into a new dream. He found himself in a sunlit park, laughter and birdsong filling the air. Beside him was a woman, her hand intertwined with his. Her face glowed with affection, her laugh like music. She was everything he had ever wanted, kind, funny, and endlessly understanding. They walked together, sharing stories, stealing glances, and savoring the simple joy of being close. Time blurred as they built a life together. There were lazy Sunday mornings, shared secrets, and whispered promises. He felt whole. For the first time, it seemed like everything had fallen into place. But as the dream unfolded, cracks began to form here too. One day they argued. A small disagreement about something trivial, a misplaced key, a forgotten errand, but the tension it unleashed was sharp and unyielding. Her voice, once gentle, carried a cutting edge. His words, meant to defend, only deepened the divide. The dream fast-forwarded through moments of reconciliation and more conflict. He began to notice the little things that grated on him, the parts of her that didn't align with the perfect image he'd constructed in his mind. She, too, seemed to see his flaws more clearly. Love, it turned out, wasn't a constant state of bliss. It was messy, imperfect, and full of compromise. In one scene, they sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence between them heavy. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her eyes distant. The connection he had cherished so deeply felt frayed, slipping from his grasp. No matter how tightly he tried to hold on, he felt the crushing weight of unmet expectations. Love hadn't healed him or solved his problems, it had merely brought them into sharper focus. When he woke, the room felt cold despite the warmth of his blanket. His chest was heavy, his throat tight. He reached for the journal, flipping to the page with his newest resolution: find true love and build a perfect relationship. With a slow, deliberate motion, he drew a line through it. His hand lingered over the page, the pen poised, but no new resolution came to mind. He closed the journal and stared at the ceiling, the emptiness inside him sharper than ever. Was there anything that could truly bring him peace? The journal lay open before him once again, but this time the pages seemed emptier than ever. He had crossed out resolution after resolution, each one promising fulfillment, only to leave him more broken. The ink stains on the page mirrored the stains on his heart, each goal an attempt at happiness, but none lasting, none whole. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. His room felt claustrophobic, the walls closing in with the heavy silence. He thought about the previous dreams, the fleeting glory of wealth, the hollow rush of fitness, the perfect, shattered image of love. None of it had worked. None of it had filled the hole inside him. In a moment of frustration, he threw the pen across the room. He stared at the journal, feeling its silent judgment. Why do I keep doing this? He thought. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy? The air felt thick, oppressive, and a cold sweat formed on his forehead. The pressure, the constant striving, the chasing of something unattainable, it had all become too much. His chest tightened, and his mind spiraled. I'm never going to find peace, he thought bitterly. Maybe there's just something wrong with me. He closed his eyes, trying to breathe, but his mind refused to quiet. It was as if the dream world had seeped into reality, his failures, his desires, all blending into a single overwhelming force that he couldn't escape. The tears came suddenly, hot and fast. He hadn't expected them, hadn't felt them coming. They pooled at the corners of his eyes and spilled down his cheeks, stinging like salt on an open wound. For the first time in a long while, he let himself weep. There was no fraud, no pretension. He was just a person, raw and vulnerable, feeling the weight of his own disillusionment. The dream that night was unlike any he had experienced before. There were no crowds, no bright lights, no lofty goals. He found himself standing in the middle of a vast, empty field. The air was thick with the scent of earth and grass, and the sky stretched endlessly above him, a soft, muted blue. For once, there was no expectation, no pressure. It felt quiet. In the distance, he saw a figure, a silhouette, standing alone at the edge of the field. As he walked toward them, the figure turned, and he recognized their face. It was him. Not the version of himself chasing dreams, not the person striving for wealth, fitness, or love, but him, stripped bare, without the masks or resolutions. He stood before his own reflection, unsure what to say. But then, the other version of him spoke, his voice gentle, almost kind. You're always looking for something outside of yourself, he said. But what if it's not about achieving anything at all? The question hung in the air like a weightless thought. What if you just are? The figure continued, his eyes soft but steady. What if happiness isn't something to chase, but something to experience, to live, moment by moment? The words hit him like a wave, crashing over the barriers he'd built around himself. He realized, in that quiet moment, that he had been so focused on finding the right goal, the perfect life, that he had never stopped to actually live it. He had been chasing a mirage. He woke with a start, the morning light spilling through the blinds, casting shadows on the floor. The room felt different, less suffocating, more open. The weight in his chest was still there, but it didn't feel as unbearable. The journal sat on his nightstand, the cover still glistening in the light. He reached for it, but this time, he didn't feel the need to write anything down. Instead, he closed the journal and set it aside. He didn't need a resolution. He didn't need a perfect goal or a shiny dream to chase. For the first time in what felt like years, he realized that happiness wasn't something he had to strive for. It wasn't a destination. It was in the quiet moments, the ones that slipped through the cracks of ambition and expectation. He got out of bed, feeling the coolness of the floor beneath his feet. He opened the window, letting the fresh air fill his lungs. The world outside was vast, but it didn't feel so daunting anymore. Maybe the journey wasn't about reaching some ideal. Maybe it was simply about being present in each experience, embracing whatever came his way, whether it was joy or pain. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel broken. He just felt alive.